What's interesting is that who's standing behind Hamas? Who's funding Hamas? And the answer is Qatar. Qatar is a mass funder of terror and death all around the world, including $250 million to Khalid Mashal that has his headquarters in Qatar. And I think we have to stop this.
The old baseball saying was you can't tell the players without a scorecard, and such is unfortunately the case in the Middle East with regard to the burgeoning weight of various terrorist groups determined to bring about their version of global revolution. Revolutions are messy, and they are also very expensive. Hamas knows this all too well as they seek to replace the weapons used and removed from their hands after the latest battle with Israel. They know where the money comes from. We know where it comes from. Yet what, if anything, realistically can be done to interrupt those dollars? And are the Saudis actually willing to step up? Let's welcome back to MidPoint, Professor of Middle East Studies at Florida Atlantic University, former project manager of the U.S. State Department-funded Iraq Research and Documentation Project, and author of a forthcoming book on Salafism, which actually, there's the book right there, in Lebanon, Dr. Robert Rabil. Dr.
Thank
Rabil,
you, Ed.
always a pleasure to see you
again.
again.
It's my pleasure and my honor, Ed, always. Thank you.
Here we go. You and I have talked about this money before.
Many times, yes.
Qatar, though,
yes,
is the one that Qatar and Saudi Arabia, but let's start with Qatar.
Yes.
It's astounding when you
Yes.
look at the amount of money here. They have 1/7 of the proven gas supplies
Correct.
in the world, financial resources, $200 billion in financial reserves. They own a soccer team. They started a television network.
Yeah.
They give money to institutes here in America.
Yes.
They are legitimizing themselves as much as they can be.
Yes.
Bottom line, though,
Yes.
this is a terrorist group that cannot be trusted, or at least a terrorist nation that cannot be trusted. How's that? Is that fair?
Well, I don't know about that, a terrorist group or a terrorist
nation. I wanted to come out.
You know, I don't know
myself.
about that. Why? Because you have to look at Qatar and the location of Qatar and the psyche of Qatar. Qatar has pursued what the State Department called a multi-directional policy. What I call myself, it has pursued an independent policy. It's hedging its policy. Let's not forget it lives and operates in the shadow of Saudi Arabia. And this is why, and it has dispute with Saudi Arabia and with Bahrain. And those disputes go back to history. So mainly, it pursues a kind of policy that said, listen, I'm going to allow certain dissent. I'm going to support the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm going to support the Salafists. Why? Because I believe they are key actor in Arab politics. This is on the one hand. But on the other hand, also, let's not forget, when we went to invade Iraq, the Saudi told us, well, we have the Sultan base. We don't know if we're going to use it. And then we used the base in Qatar. Al Udeid base in Qatar that they host is the largest U.S. base in the Gulf. And not only that, you have another base which is the largest pre-positioning base for American equipment in the Gulf. So here, what do you have now? You have a country that is pursuing conflicting policy. And their objective, they conflict.
But they do throw money, they do channel money into Hamas and terrorist groups. So in essence, are they not an enabler of terrorism in the Middle East?
Well, if you want to look at it this way, I cannot counter-argue that. I can say that, you know, in October 2012, the former Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Hamad, went to Gaza and pledged $400 million. From my position, I was extremely upset. If he wanted to go there, he should have gone to Ramallah. He should have met with Mahmoud Abbas and then probably decide whether to go to Hamas. But he pledged $400 million to Hamas. So he does give money. He does give money to the Salafists who are in Syria. And probably some of this money, it will go to ISIS. But from their position, they believe that they are supporting those Salafists who they are not engaged in violence, and that's a very weak argument they have.
Okay, we've got to the weak argument there. That's exactly where it needs to come. Saudi Arabia is seen by Americans, many Americans, as being so powerful.
Yes.
But are the Saudis really powerful enough to talk to Qatar and say, you need to do this? Can they pressure them at all? Or at this point, does Qatar sit back and go, sorry, we do what we want. You have no control over us or no influence over us at all?
All right. Until very recently and until the emergence of ISIS, Qatar told them, Qatar and Turkey, but mainly Qatar told Saudi Arabia, listen, I want to work with you, but I'm going to still follow an independent policy. I don't want to be in the shadow of Saudi foreign policy. This has changed with the emergence of ISIS, and also this has changed with the pressure, systematic pressure that Saudi Arabia put on Qatar. And it wasn't only Qatar, it was Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, and they told them, listen, the rest, you have 6 in the GCC country, and led by Saudi Arabia, you cannot do this. This threat is on our doorstep. And we are going, and based on reports that I read in the press, you know, that go back to November 2013, they had certain guidelines to stop supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. And then it became, you know, they upped the ante, until recently, 2 days ago, based on report that I read, they said, listen, if you are not going to act, we are going to close off the border with you. So you better listen. And this explains why Qatar took the decision to tell, you know, the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood, mainly those who are associated with the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, to leave Qatar.
But what you're saying right here, fair to say, though, that the Saudis may have a temporary sort of influence on Qatar, but they still act on their own.
They acted. This time they acted, and they acted really in a forceful way.
Do the Saudis have the authority? Many people for years have always thought that the Saudis are the ones, big money, they can get things done in that area of the world. Do they really have that sort of power anymore, or have they been overshadowed by some of these countries like Qatar and others who simply have money now? They have a tremendous amount of wealth available to them.
It's a very good point you bring out. Until very recently, Qatar has moved away from the Saudi shadow, as I mentioned to you.
Right.
And they had a problem. Let's not forget, in 1995, when Sheikh Hamad came to power, the Saudi disagreed with him and they opposed him. And let's not forget also, Qatar has dispute with Bahrain over the Hawar Island, and Qatar shares with Iran the largest gas field, the North Field. So from Qatar perspective, it is going to pursue a foreign policy independent of Saudi Arabia. But now things has changed. You have a unity among the GCC countries. They are telling Qatar, listen, you are here. You are not in Europe. You are in the Gulf, and the Gulf now is facing serious threat, serious problem, and you better be on board.
So having set all this up, how does anybody stop Qatar from funding Hamas? Is it even possible at this point to interrupt that flow of money?
It's difficult, and let me tell you why it's difficult. If the Qatari government, now Sheikh Tamim and his family members, they don't send money, you might have some wealthy Qatari that could send money. Let's not forget, money is fungus in the Middle East. So I think it's difficult not to send money to Hamas.
Money is a fungus in the Middle East.
And for the Qatari government, as I mentioned to you, they support the Muslim Brotherhood as a key aspect of their foreign policy because they believe they have been playing a key role in the region, and they will always be playing a key role in the region.
What about Turkey?
Turkey.
We've been here before.
Yes,
if you're going to talk about Saudi Arabia and Qatar, you must talk about Turkey's involvement.
Absolutely. In fact, Erdogan has announced he's going to welcome those Muslim Brotherhood who are going to leave Qatar. And he's going to welcome
Make it very clear, he's welcoming the terrorists to his country.
He is welcoming the Muslim Brotherhood, and not only that, some reports in the Middle East, and I believe they are credible, Turkey is going to be the host of hundreds, if not thousands, of Muslim brothers from the Gulf country. And why? I am not surprised, because Erdogan is an Islamist, and Erdogan has been supporting for a long time the Muslim Brotherhood. In Syria, Erdogan has supported the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria. So mainly his policy, Erdogan's policy, the Turkish government policy, has been supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. And it should not come as a surprise that he is going to welcome this leader and more leaders to come to go and live in Turkey.
Is it now?
Istanbul especially.
Okay, minute I got left here. Yes. Turkey's now a player in all this.
Yes.
ISIS sits out here. We haven't even really talked about them much at this point. But does ISIS wind up in Turkey next?
Well, ISIS is on the border of Turkey.
Sure, but that's what I'm saying. Do they wind up does Turkey wind up offering them safe haven?
No, of course not, because they have a serious problem with ISIS. ISIS, here you have certain theological difference between ISIS and the Erdogan Islamist ideology. Erdogan, he balances democracy with Islamism. ISIS, you have absolutely no compromise. They want to apply their own view of Islam, their own fanatical, fundamentalist view of Islam. And in that, you have really a gap, an ideological gap between the two. So I don't think Erdogan is going to allow ISIS. What the government of Turkey did a mistake. They turned a blind eye to the jihadi, especially that come, whether from Europe or from the Caucasus, the Chechen, the Dagestani. And that was a big, big mistake. Mainly, he focused on removing Assad, and he saw them, the Salafi jihadi, as a potent force. And this is where really some of the huge mistake that took place within the Syrian opposition and within the Turkish government by feeling that, well, these are the people who are going to remove Assad, let's allow them in. They went in and they had their own plans.
And we got to go. We are all out of time. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show again. We always learn a little something. Dr. Robert Rabil, his forthcoming book, Salafism in Lebanon.
Thank you.